Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are on this great planet Earth, this tiny little blue ball in space, if you will. I don't know if it's a disc or whatever it is, but it is 11:14 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the voice that you are currently hearing is that of Jonathan JJCouey. I am Chief Biologist at Gigaohm Biological, based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In the back of my garage, I used to be an academic biologist, and you can find the stain of that work on the National Library of Medicine using my last name, Couey, and my first two initials. I think you should take note of the second paper that shows up on PubMed there and the list of authors that is featured in that paper. It's a weird 2021 paper that no one seems to really care about, even though it's a roadmap to the list of international meddlers that started this mess on Twitter. I have spoken 3 times to a group called Panda, which I think is basically sabotaged. I've also spoken and presented one time to the National Citizens Inquiry in Canada, which I also think is probably compromised. I have presented to the steering committee or the trustees or whoever the hell they were of the wellness company a few years ago. I have worked for more than a year and a half in the employment of Children's Health Defense that it culminated in the publishing of this book, where I am listed as one of the experts that made it possible. I was also given a little shot at the Red Pill Expo thanks to my friend G. Edward Griffin. Not to say that there weren't other meddlers there, but I was at least given a platform. And if you haven't seen that presentation from June 2024, I highly recommend it. If you want to be notified of this work when it happens, starting probably next week, please follow the directions on the screen and send an email to that address. Or you can go to gigaohmbiological.com and there's a little button that will kind of do it for you. If you want to support the stream, there's also ways to do it there at that website. I host all of my videos at stream.gigaohm.bio. I host a private public conversation at gigaohm.bio. And I take donations and, whatever you want to send in the way of references to P.O. Box 802, Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, 15102. RNA cannot pandemic. Intramuscular injections are dumb. Transfection is a crime, and population pyramids are real. And they told us something before the pandemic. I will be back in a few minutes. This intro is new and kind of serious. And like I said, I'll be back in a few minutes.
Shouldn't just be a few people that are leaders. Everybody has to figure out their own leader inside themselves. If they're too shy to go approach somebody in person, then stick a card or a flyer on someone's car next to you every time you park your car. Stick a card inside of a gas station credit card slot every time you get gas. If everybody that is aware of the truth and awake to the truth started to do these things, we can touch people, the hearts and minds of people, one person at a time in day-to-day living. We don't need these echo chambers online where we're all repeating to the same followers most of the time. We get a few new people, but I think we really need more people to take what they're learning and get out there and touch the people that they're in a community with.
By about 1660, John Locke wrote that day laborers and tradesmen, spinsters and dairymaids must be told what to believe. The greatest part cannot know, and therefore they must believe.
So that is what I've been predicting all the time, that ultimately this evolution would inevitably lead to the emergence of a highly virulent variant that would cause waves of hospitalization and severe disease in highly vaccinated countries. Of course, always the same, only in highly vaccinated countries, right?
Well, that's a relief.
It's literally turning into worst case
the latest
scenario.
data tells us that we're dealing with essentially a worst case
turning
scenario.
into worst
I'm
case
afraid
scenario.
that the latest data tells us that we're dealing with essentially
literally
a
turning
worst case
into
scenario.
worst case scenario.
I'm afraid that the latest data tells us that we're
It's
dealing
literally
with
turning
essentially a
into
worst case scenario. I'm afraid that
thing, but you can tell if someone's lying. You can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie. I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar. I think it's like really important not to be a liar.
The specialization should make you suspicious. It should, because if it's gotten harder to evaluate what's going on, then it's presumably gotten easier for people to lie and to exaggerate, and then one should be a little bit suspicious, and that's sort of my starting bias.
The question about pandemic, and Stephen, your immunology professor said very good because the question was very good, and of course, as I've been trying to say for 4 years now, there is no pandemic. There was no pandemic, and there will be no pandemic. And it's like Jay said, the RNA can't pandemic. It can't. And there's no reason to discuss this anymore because it's clear. And if it's clear, we shouldn't waste time talking about it.
Your latest video with Paul was amazing, JJ. Really,
wow, that's a very nice compliment. Thank you very much. Can you hear me better now or not?
Yes, much better.
Okay, good.
It was really like it nailed down two things for me, but I finally really understand the infectious clone idea. And I think it's very, very likely what happened. It aligns so well with the fact that I don't think anybody has been wrong so far. It's just nobody had a complete picture. And this kind of suits all of these things. There was a misinterpretation of the real question that was being asked. And what people really wanted to know is this SARS-2 thing a virus? That's the real question, not whether or not viruses exist in general. I mean, I think that just got mixed up too.
They get mixed up in there indeed. And I think that people they get swept away in that. And it's a very much more, I think the people that are actually misrepresenting the no virus angle, and I do believe there are people that are doing it, are purposefully not curious about what happened. They're just sure that what they say didn't happen. And that part of it really bothers me. It drives me bananas. And it's the reason why I don't think it makes complete sense.
That's a perfect segue, by the way, to go to JJ's ideas about the infectious clones. I mean, it's a fascinating idea, and it makes so much sense. It gives credence to they did it on purpose as a biological weapon idea.
You want to go, JJ?
Yes. Thank you. I'll go. So I've been active, like a lot of these humans, in trying to get the word out about basic biology. And I've been kind of focused on learning the immunology again, after having learned it as an undergraduate, as a grad student, and trying to figure out where the line of fidelity in virology is really drawn. And after about 1.5 years of this struggle, I had my path cross the path of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And so since then, I've been a scientific advisor for him behind the scenes. And a lot of my recent work has been spurred by questions, and specifically questions about what is an infectious clone? What do they mean when they say this? Was a question that was posed to me by Bobby. And over the course of trying to figure out what the implications of this methodology were, I've come to realize that I think it's possible that there are more smoke and mirrors than anybody wants to really admit.
I'm not sure exactly who he is. His name is JJCouey, and I believe he's a consultant for CHD. And I believe he has a PhD in some sort of scientific discipline, from what I understand.
Introduce Jonathan, who's going to talk about his latest kind of distillation of what the pandemic means to society, to biology, to science, and to democracy, and to the whole kind of idea of empiricism and integrity. And then each of us, this incredible preeminent panel that we have, each one of you is going to get a chance to comment
So for what it's worth, I mean, it's such a chaotic scene right now. It seems like, intentionally, obviously it's only going to get worse with the election coming up. I still, I don't follow very many people anymore. I just follow like 22. If I follow somebody, I trust them, as far as I know, as much as it depends on my knowledge and sense of things, that it's not that I agree with everything that person says necessarily, but that person they are who they say they are. They are authentic. If, I admit that I'm biased because I know that, especially Jonathan Engler, I know him well. So, and have, for a year plus. So, if Jonathan Engler turns out to be, something that he's not, or some kind of manipulator, I mean, I would be devastated. I would be absolutely devastated, and probably, quit this whole thing and be like, okay, then I don't know anybody. Then I can't tell anything. So that doesn't mean that you have to see it the same way. Martin, same. Like, as far as I know, Martin and Norman Fenton are putting, they put their Substacks over the past 4 years into a book. I've read I skimmed the book, and the chapter, or excuse me, that paper that they, that Jonathan and Martin just wrote, where they included your work, it's going into that book. And content that I wrote with them is going into that book. Martin's in the academic world. He was finishing marking up papers this week. So, and he does play things a little closer to the vest, right? That is the way he is on social media. But my experiences with him have been very good. So yeah, if those guys are like playing me or using me, or who knows, right? Again, I don't know what to say, but I would continue, if I can't tell you what to do, but I would continue to I recommend giving them the benefit of the doubt until there's really, really good reason not to. Catherine Watson, interesting one for me. I mean, I replied to her on Sage Hannah's Substack. I actually blocked Sage Hannah, but because he, told me he didn't care if I got shot in the head or some kind of crazy nonsense. I have no idea who runs that Substack. I think Catherine's legitimate. I don't understand the role of Sasha Latipova 100%, but I've been honest about that with people about what I think is going on there. Again, head down. I'm really trying to focus on what I'm doing and what I do well as much as possible, because I believe that will bring the best result. And you've been really formative, for me, and I think a lot of other people, and you've taken the hits, not just with the clone stuff or the possibilities of, building a biological bridge there with the clone, but you've been helpful in helping people see who some of these players really are. I think that in some ways is probably your best, biggest contribution. And I've tried to honor that and cite you where and when I can. So, I only know who I am, and I'm legit. Okay, have a good day.
None of them say murder. None of them mention supplemental oxygen and how it can induce acute respiratory distress syndrome. None of them mention the poor use of ventilation, the lack of antibiotic use being murder, or the multi-year opioid crisis and how it contributes to the effects that they are attributing to the novel virus. And none of them mention Brandy Vaughn. None of them say murder. None of them explain PCR as a fraud. None explain injection versus ingestion. None mention the population pyramid, and none mention Brandy Vaughn.
I don't care how you get there. I don't care what you do to get there. The goal is to win.
What time is it? Game time! Woo!
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. This is Gigaohm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist. Make sure you're following Housatonic Live. Of course, that's a little joke there. You can see it in the web address, HousatonicITS.com. Make sure you're also following the Liberty Perspective on Rumble. I hope you're also aware of Grace's dad on Rumble. That is deprogramming with Grace's dad. And I hope you're also aware of Uwe Ulshner on Substack. Never Again is now global. And finally, I'd like to give a shout out to Ned on Substack, who's done some great artwork, inspired by Gigaohm Biological and others. A great little Substack to check out. Ladies and gentlemen, those who see and those who need to be shown quickly, because our children are about to be enslaved by these people. They are committed to a spectacular level to these lies. These groups have expanded not because the message is spreading, but because it's being titrated and diluted and obfuscated, because it's part of the game. It is part of the illusion. Team Worst Case Scenario was part of the illusion because they're all trying to get us into the same trap. Same trap. It is all part of a global system to manipulate the organized manipulation of the habits and opinions of the masses. That's what we're dealing with here. And I think it's an important place to be right now to understand it this way, that Noam Chomsky has said it for a while correctly. And it is simple. It is simple to say a spectacular commitment to lies is all that is required. One of the best examples I had in the pandemic was the idea that my little boy were going to play a joke on the little sister by coordinatedly lying to her about something in Minecraft and pretending that one wasn't there when he was or something like that. But it is the coordinated action of one or more persons lying together that can be especially convincing. And that's why I opened with all of these group podcasts where 4 or 5 people sit in front of you and talk about and agree about something. It is very difficult to resist that. And if that group of people is composed of fake accounts and real accounts on social media, if you are interacting with people like Soph or her mom on social media, there's really no telling who you're actually interacting with. There's no telling what the motives of them might be because of who they have coordinated their lies with. Who's coordinating their lies? That includes Meryl Nass and Robert Malone and a lot of other characters that at this time should really be on your radar as shady simply because of their track record. Brett Weinstein doesn't have the track record of somebody who's usefully fighting. He has the track record of a performer, very similar to that of Meryl Nass, of Mary Holland, and many of these others that we're just afraid to admit haven't made any progress in a decade. They are traitors to our children, and the only thing they can do now is make admissions. Pretend that they always knew. Pretend that it didn't matter. For example, here's Kevin McKernan in concert with an anonymous account pretending that telling people that these were transfections in 2020 wouldn't have mattered. He's pretending that maybe he even said it once, which he didn't, of course. He's pretending that not one college kid would have cared to know that they were being coerced into transfecting themselves. And that same liar is spectacularly committed to other lies now that he's telling on big podcasts. And he has actually been doing it for the entire duration of the pandemic. He's been doing it on Twitter, where he has also been very vocal about how that's where the mystery's being solved. And of course, this is all about teaching our children gain of function. It's all about teaching our children this mythology. And the trick is getting us to teach it to our kids, because if it's just on the news, but all the parents say the news is bullshit, then this won't work. We have to be scared enough to teach our kids, and that's why it's dangerous that the farm animals are waking up. That's why it's dangerous that adults are starting to find common sense again. That's why it's dangerous that adults are starting to realize that the other adults on TV are just kids in adult clothing. They are just children like we are. We are all children of Earth, and this is about the grandchildren of Earth, actually. And once you realize that, you realize that the only way out is non-compliance. And that's not what any of these people are engaged in. The truth is right in your face, but they're not engaged in non-compliance. Not by any stretch of the imagination was Brett Weinstein engaged in non-compliance. Did he save anyone from the masks in the band room? No one is talking about the history and how it matters. But it definitely matters. We have given power over to these charlatans. And this might be time to take it back. It might be the one time in history where it's possible to take it back from them. And the reason why is because they've goofed up, ladies and gentlemen. I really think that they've goofed up. I think it's actually possible that they have goofed up. I don't know what I just did there. Hold on one second. Is that possible? Yeah, that's right. Wow, I don't know what happened there. I didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that. This time could be different, though, and I think if we start to realize who these people are on this map and who they've been connected to that I didn't have personal connections to, all these people are people that I would be willing to bet all the chips on. And if I'm wrong, I'm only going to be wrong about a couple of those people, because I have a detailed diary of the experiences I've had with these people, and I think that, you know, part of the role that I have, the gift that I might be able to offer the world is just that truth. Whatever happened to me, the alien that I saw, I want to tell that story to as many people as possible, because I think it is a message of hope. It is a message of truth. It is a message of biology. It is a message of the triumph over friendship, over this, because my friendship with Mark Kulak is one of the reasons why I am where I am. My friendship with some of these other people is one of the reasons why I am where I am, like Jeff and Kara, like Greg in California, and other Greg in California, like a Rodney in California. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth is intramuscular injection is dumb, and Brandy Vaughn told us that in 2015. Transfection in healthy people is definitely a crime, because every academic biologist in America and around the world should know that. And RNA cannot pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, RNA cannot pandemic. And if you know anything about DNA and all the magic that it's responsible for, then you should know enough to be skeptical of this idea that an RNA molecule spilled in a mud puddle at the market in Wuhan is responsible for the last 5 years of human history. That is a mythology that a lot of people are doing heavy lifting on, and we're going to stop it by trying to spread the word very simply. Something that could fit on a billboard, for example. Something that could be on an 8x10 or on a business card. Like the U.S. vaccine schedule is a criminal enterprise. Oh my goodness, that's pretty scary to say, isn't it? But it's not really, when you understand that the foundational principle of the vaccine schedule, intramuscular injection, is just plain dumb. It's just dumb. You don't need a bunch of randomized controlled trials with placebo to understand that intramuscular injection is dumb. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. This is Gigaohm Biological. I'm my own producer, so give me 1 second to flip over to another camera. Good morning, everyone. This is Gigaohm Biological. My name is JJCouey, coming to you live from my garage in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm very happy to be here. It's been a few days off. I've had a lot of balls in the air here, trying to keep ends meet. Yesterday, the furnace died. Long story short, the furnace is working again. Hopefully, this is a giant cup of something coming. Oh my gosh, look at that. And this is a new cup that I got from my wife, which I think is really great. It's a cup of coffee that is covered in mixtapes. I don't know if mixtapes matter or anything like that, but mixtapes was a metaphor that Jessica Rose really liked, and so I thought it was pretty cool. Nice gift from my wife. Ooh, that's hot. I like my hot coffee. Welcome to the show. It is the 25th of February, 2025. I've got a long one for you, but there's lots of work to do. It's a lot about connecting the dots, okay? It's a lot about understanding really what's happening, and it's also about my maturing from somebody who's trying to understand what's going on frantically, trying to still deal with the loss of what I thought was the career that I was going to have for the rest of my life, the idea that I had an identity as a neurobiologist that I've now kind of lost in the sense of what I thought it was and what it meant to me and all the people whose respect I thought was important. It's been a long 5 years for me and my family. It's been a long 5 years for me and my wife, who is my best friend and who, has watched me grow and wither and grow and wither through the waves of pain that this whole ordeal has been for our family. But in the end, we've come through stronger, and it is 2025, and it is absolutely remarkable where we are. And I'm really excited to be able to take you on this little journey today. It is a journey of hope. I really think it's a journey of hope. It's a journey of hope in the sense that I think the evidence is clear now. Let me make myself a little bigger. It is clear now from the behavior of these people that if you just lay it out on a calendar, it's kind of like you just have to shoulder shrug and say like, okay, so maybe Jay's right about these people. Like it doesn't really make sense anymore. And I think Mark Kulak has done a really good job of archiving everything that needs to be archived, but his latest work, archiving Brandy Vaughn's recent history, and her work as an anti-vaxxer when she came on the scene in 2015 or something like that, has really been vital to kind of demonstrating to me as a biologist who's been struggling to understand and struggling with doubt. Every day I wake up and wonder if I'm wrong about this stuff. Have I made a fool of myself for the last 5 years? Is there something really big that I've missed? Is it possible that I've dragged my family through all of this and I'm a fraud? You don't think I ask myself that every once in a while? Well, of course I do. In fact, the only reason why I could possibly be here, or here, whatever you want to see it as, the only way that I could be here where I am is because at every possibility, I have doubted myself. Every person that I've met, I've asked to help me, to reassure me that I'm not wrong about these things, that I'm not crazy for asking these questions. And so for me, my best thing that I can offer you is that for your family and friends, it might not be for all of them. This message of hope might not be for all of them, but it is for any of them. Any of them that is willing to just listen and think along can hear it. And it will take an hour or two. But if changing the fundamental way that someone thinks about their world in a positive, in a enlightening, in a freeing and invigorating sort of way costs an hour and a half, I don't really think that's a big price to pay. And so I'm going to attempt to take a swing at the fence today because I really think some people have made a pretty big mistake. And if I can carefully, without too much emotion, illustrate what these people have done, I think it will become very obvious, and it will line up so well, it will harmonize so well with all of the other examples of very similar meddling that we've seen throughout the pandemic, and you will actually see that it's just all one big show. And it will become a message that you, one of you out there, might become more motivated to share than you've ever been before. Maybe there's 10 people out there who've been sitting and passively taking in my work for a year that will finally be spurred to action by today's show. That's the only thing I can really hope, is that every show might change one person's mind who will start to decide to make their own Gigaohm Biological business card and start to distribute it with the link that they think is most important. And very soon we will have landing pages on Gigaohm Biological that will succinctly be these kinds of things. You know, it's not very hard for you to take a screenshot of any of these slides and put them out there. But we'll make it easier and easier, because this is for all the marbles. This is for the grandchildren of Earth. And that means that this is about you and me and our kids. And we have to start to realize that we need to bring our kids on side to understand that this is a multi-generational war for their children, which is our grandchildren, right? It has been a long, strange trip since somebody stapled my website to a trucker billboard or a trucker sign in Canada. It's been a long, long trip since this picture was taken at the inaugural CHD conference in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's been a very long, strange trip that it's taken me in order to get to the stage where I, too, could kind of try to say it like Edward Bernays has said it, like Noam Chomsky has said it, like lots of scholars have said it. But say it in a way that's meaningful for today's kids, for today's teenagers, the overclass, the people for whom money doesn't matter, are able to remain in control of the world and ever more influential on our governments, because they place highly trained acolytes in positions on social media with artificial elevation to manipulate the habits and opinions of the voters to whom these people are responsible. And so they can manipulate the system from within and from out in order to control it. And so, yes, you know, for a long time we've been talking about the fact that our government is corrupted, but not understanding the breadth and the depth of the corruption will never allow our kids to understand why voting is not going to get them out unless they're voting for each other. Voting is never going to get us out unless we're voting for each other. Unless you know who you're electing, you're done. And unless that person is going in with the intention of wrecking it, we're just going to have the status quo. And that is what's happening. Maybe I'm getting a little off message here, but to understand what happened in the pandemic, ladies and gentlemen, you need to accept the fact that it's been a while now since the overclass has had people in place on YouTube and on social media doing stuff that you thought was just another person out there, another guy out there, another girl out there, somebody with a dream. No, these are people that were paid, placed, and artificially promoted in front of us so that they rose in our consciousness as people that we think about on social media, doing things that we ourselves would never have time for. And that is ultimately what happened at the beginning of the pandemic until now, is that they were able to convince us to teach our children that there was a novel virus, although we can't be sure when it really broke out. And some people think it's a lab virus, other people don't. I don't even know. You know, I'm kind of agnostic about that. And in the meantime, because these people were in place on social media manipulating the questions that we ask, no one has come to the useful conclusion that PCR as a diagnostic is a fraud, period. No one has come to the conclusion that pure oxygen could be used to create everything that happened in America in 2020. Even though Pierre Corey and Peter McCullough surely could figure that out. The literature goes back to the late 90s and early 80s, or late 80s, early 90s. And finally, any doctor worth their salt should at this point be saying that anybody who was not given antibiotics in 2020 under the pretense that it's a viral pneumonia should be considered a murder. That's the bottom line. Anybody that didn't get antibiotics and had a urinary tract infection, that's murder. Anybody that died of cold or thirst, like in the UK, that's murder. It's not democide, it's murder. Democide is a dumb word that doesn't mean what you think it means. It's murder. And so now what has been established as a result of these coordinated liars is a existing remnant stream. And in case you're not aware of it because you've been asleep at the wheel like many adults on Earth, the remnants from hospitals are sold to pharmaceutical companies and to biotech companies and to universities. And the more consistent the source of remnant, the more valuable it potentially is. For example, you can do the research yourself and find out that placentas are sold. You can also do the research to find out that C-section placentas are sold at a significantly higher rate of cost, and they get much more money for them than they do a normal birth placenta. You also may not be aware, but circumcising male babies is still going on in America, and it's still happening really close to the birth date, like sometimes the same day. They cut all the foreskin off the penises of babies in America. And that is not done for the health of the baby. That is done because those remnants are valuable, because they are the source of cell culture, fibroblasts. And this is still ongoing. You can find virologists who just talk about it in their Virology 101 lectures. And yet somehow we still have a Health and Human Services secretary who's mainly focused on certain numbered dyes and any number of other things at random, but not a priority 1, 2, 3, 4 list. And Children's Health Defense, you know, the premier organization in America that's supposedly fighting against this medical industrial complex, has never once mentioned remnants. Not once. None of these dissidents mention it. But actually, think about the number of remnants. This is a message specifically to the college kids out there. If you went to a college in 2020 and 2021 where you were made to test any amount, your DNA was sampled. If you were made to quarantine and test your way out of quarantine, your DNA was sampled. That's the bottom line. And so if you went to a university where testing was mandatory, your DNA was sampled. And you should form a class action lawsuit with everybody that matriculated in that school during those years with you. You should be doing that right now. And this is going on right now in all of our hospitals, and it's going to continue to go on as long as these people are allowed to distract the American public and most adults with their nonsense. Now, the bottom line is I'm going to have to present this like 100 more times, so it's not going to be the best presentation today, but the content of the presentation is what is most important right now. And what we've uncovered, and should have probably uncovered already a year ago if I would have been paying attention, or my email wouldn't have been screwed up, or I wasn't an idiot, is that Brandy Vaughn's story is like a repeat of all of our stories, but it's like a few years before the pandemic. Basically, she's a lady who got very close to pharma, figured out that pharma was full of crap, and then suddenly realized, wait, if pharma's full of crap, then what about these vaccines? And then realized, oh my goodness, what's happening here? And started speaking out about it. And she spoke about it with very much precision that included things like, ingestion versus ingestion is very, very different. And injection versus ingestion is very close to what I've been saying lately, which is intramuscular injection is dumb. And when I finally pulled my head out and figured out that Brandy had it right in 2016, it actually shockingly lines up with the time frame of the people that I've worked with during the course of the pandemic who curiously never told me about Brandy Vaughn. It's weird, right, to be an employee of CHD and never hear of Brandy Vaughn. Anyway, that's my story. Brandy Vaughn, in 2015, we watched a video from 2016. In 2016, on April 1st, is when Vaxxed was released and also when ICANN was formed. And actually, the World Mercury Project didn't change its name to CHD until 2018. And so there's a whole couple years here where Mary Holland is promoted on Democracy Now! Opposite Paul Offit as an anti-vaxxer who's worried about a component of the MMR and just wants testing. Strange, huh? Sounds like a very familiar message that hasn't gotten Mary Holland to save very many people since October of 2015, seeing as we're now in 2025, which, if you can do the math, is about 10 years later. I mean, Democracy Now! 10 years ago, and this is all we got? And so, of course, Brandy had billboards in more than 30 states. Would it surprise you at all that even before this, that Polly Tommy had more than 90 billboards in the UK and got to meet with the Prime Minister? Would that surprise you at all? So my statement, to be very clear, is that I suspect that most of these, if not all of these organizations, are essentially front groups to waste our time. They are front groups to waste our money. Front groups to oppose the WHO, front groups to get free speech or a health, big top tent of health freedom. And none of these are useful organizations. They are all compromised. I'm sure of it because they all brought us this and all do not question it. And so if you want to understand where we are, I think the best way to do it, I think, is to understand that probably Steve Bannon is behind a lot of these people in some way or another, either trading money to fund them or coordinating their work or giving some, playbills or sharing scripts, distributing scripts. I don't know. But this is a Goldman Sachs guy who was one of the first people to declare a lab leak likely, one of the guy who gave us Lee Min Yan, who toured the United States Christian churches in the South with Ryan Cole and Paul Urso and Karma Doc and Robert Malone in 2021. Steve Bannon is the guy, I think. And Kevin McKernan is obviously very important. His father was already into sequencing technologies and microarray stuff. His brothers work on cancer. And there's just no explanation for this guy's calendar. From 2020 onward, he's playing their game, singing their song, announcing their questions, and manipulating our habits and opinions on social media. And quite frankly, Bret Weinstein was given $500,000 to transition to social media manipulation of opinion and habits, and has been busy with it ever since. And just keep in mind that I was connected to him by someone named Piper Stover, who, for some reason, even though her name has been available since I published my review in 2021, nobody cares about her. And the fact that she worked in China for 10 years. And all the things she's connected to. It's just weird. They can't investigate anything, but they can post Zillow pictures of my old house. So I think that all of these people are in on it. I think that some of them have the whole script. Some of them just go along because they want fame and fortune, like Julian Michaels has just been waiting for her call, to get up there. She got called a year before this or 2 years before this, and Vincent Ranson-Yellow was like an audition. And then a year later, this Scheckenberger guy from California, who's one of Bret Weinstein's friends, kicks off her podcast, and away we go. And the latest one was Bret Weinstein's wife talking about shedding spike not even 4 days ago. And so since the beginning of the pandemic, Jessica Rose, Kevin McKernan, Bret Weinstein, Robert Malone, Harvey Reich. They've all been at table meetings. They've all been at private meetings on different islands and cruises and whatever, where they game this stuff out, where they decide what parts of the narrative each one of them is going to stick to. And they're all basically just a team of epigirls. And if you're not familiar with epigirls, I think Jessica Rose is probably the epigirl character in this show. And epigirl is a character in the SPARS pandemic document. SPARS, SPARS, is a hypothetical pandemic that occurred between 2025 and 2028. And in that document produced by, the American government and its associates, that there's a girl by the name of Epigirl on social media that exposes the vaccine injuries that occurred during the pandemic. I mean, this is laughable at this stage how exposed they are. These same people have been traveling the world for about 3 years, because remember, the international COVID summits didn't really start until the murder was almost over in 2021. The vast majority of the murder is committed really before the end of 2022. And so really starting the COVID summit in 2021 is kind of a joke. And in fact, if you realize there were 6 COVID summits after that, it's like, come on. And so what I am again stating very clearly is that I believe Edward Bernays had it right. I just don't think he knew how bad it would be in 2025. I think that Noam Chomsky had it right, although I don't think he had any idea how bad it would be in 2025. So much so that I think actually Noam Chomsky has no idea that he's also fooled. Maybe he does. I don't know. Ever since 9/11, I haven't really listened to Noam Chomsky anymore. And of course, this quote is not from more recent Noam Chomsky. This is from old rebel Noam Chomsky, back when he was probably telling mostly the truth. And so I think these people were put in place. I think they've coordinated their lying, and I think only because of my persistence and my, unblemished record of track record of integrity can you see it. If you just take their word for what they said and what they did when they did it, you'll never see it. But if you actually allow an objective portrayal of what they said when they said it, what you will find is that they have been avoiding saying this for more than 5 years now, which is there's an anticipated rise in expected deaths. The population pyramid of America and all Western nations in Europe will show you that it's not a good population pyramid. We don't have a replacement population coming, and we have a little bubble of old people right now. People that are going to age out. And all of these people know that population pyramid signal, like an eclipse, was taken advantage of and lied about in order to create the illusion of a pandemic using murder and lies. That's where we are, and I'm going to demonstrate exactly how they do it. So, it is with much humility that I remind you, please, if you haven't or you can and haven't really thought about it, please go to GigaOhmBiological.com and find a way to support this work. It is really just me, and I am trying my best to make ends meet with a couple other little side jobs. But as much as I can, I'm trying to produce as many of these shows as possible. But it does take some research and some time to put all this stuff together. And so I really appreciate everybody who is supporting this work. There's quite a few of you that need to be added to the list of thank yous. It's quite overwhelming sometimes how many people show up on any given week. Again, this is for all the marbles, all the grandchildren of Earth. I think that's the best way to frame it, because you want to understand it from on the right time horizon. And so the whole point of there being a 5-year pandemic was for this thing to be engaging. It needed to be something that felt like you figured it out. It needed to be something where you recalled the argument in front of the Senate 3 years ago and then added it up to what you just heard on Tucker Carlson and then added it up to what you just heard on Alex Jones. That's what had to happen in order for there to be this many people this convinced. It wouldn't be as simple as just leaking the diffuse proposal. It wouldn't just be as simple as having somebody speculate about it on Bill Maher. It was required for there to be an active sort of limited spectrum of debate within which there was a very lively debate within that spectrum, right? That's exactly what Noam Chomsky is explaining there.
So can you explain how this coronavirus,
and so what we saw yesterday, or the day whenever I did a show last, was that on March 18th, 2020, this guy already knew to start a podcast, and this guy was already podcasting. And who is this guy? This is the guy who in 2016 has a book with Skyhorse Publishing called The Environmental and Genetic Causes of Autism. You might remember that 2016 is the year that Vaxxed came out. 2016 is the year that ICANN was formed. 2016 was also the video that we watched where Brandy Vaughn was already saying that intramuscular injection is dumb and that all vaccines are stupid because intramuscular injections are dumb. And so remember, this timeline is very important to understand because this guy got a book deal from Skyhorse. Skyhorse would then move on to be the publishing partner of CHD a couple years later. And the title of this book is The Environmental and Genetic Causes of Autism. Is intramuscular injection an environmental cause? I want you to see this for what it is, because this guy in March 2020 knew more about the virus than anybody else I could find. That's why I featured him in a bike ride on JC on a Bike, my YouTube channel. Because he knew more about the virus than anyone else I could find. Again, it's hard to understand why. Hard to understand why. You know who had a book in 2018 about vaccines and autoimmunity and the changing nature of childhood illness? Thomas Cowan, the no virus guy that I feature in the beginning of this talk, that actually also has never mentioned Brandy Vaughn. So let's listen to this for just a second so you can hear how staged this is. And you only maybe can see it now in retrospect, but this is ridiculous for him to say in March 18th, 2020.
This is we've had other coronaviruses before. We had SARS and we had MERS.
Yeah.
Can you explain how this coronavirus is different than the other coronaviruses?
Absolutely. So I'm going to be on that topic. I'll be talking about published research and not yet published research. So in the published research, we know that there are genomic differences at the genome level and important parts of.
Now, the important thing to see here is if you just go back in that video a few seconds, what you will notice very clearly is that this dude clicked on his screen.
Important proteins.
So he had to go back
there
to
are
the
large
script.
differences
Let's just watch it again so you can see it. And I know I'm not nuts.
Can you explain how this coronavirus?
Watch his hands.
This is we've had other coronaviruses before. We had SARS and we had MERS.
Yeah.
Can you explain how this coronavirus is different than the other coronaviruses?
Absolutely. So I'm going to be on that topic. I'll be talking about published research and not yet published
and
research.
So he cues up a script and starts talking about things like, GP 140 and the fear and cleavage site and the whatever other things that he decides to bring up. This is not normal. This is not okay. This is a traitor. This is someone who was given a script by some of the same people who were likely meddling with Brandy Vaughn and were responsible for funding all the people that tried to step in front of Brandy before the pandemic. It's all the same people. So it's likely all the same money. It's all the same interests, trying to take a movement which was identified in the UK by Polly and Andrew Wakefield as being actually very politically valuable, and make it into a populist movement in America. Hijack it, more or less. And I think that's what's happened. I think that the fake populist Steve Bannon and his associates, maybe Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, I don't know, have collaborated to hijack the conservative right in America as a populist right movement disguised as an anti-vax health freedom movement, when in reality what they've done is completely bamboozle us for the sake of the same state that everybody else is working for. Whether he knows. He's been on stage at every CHD event I've ever been at as an expert, promoted to the highest place on stage, equal to Susan Humphreys, equal to Bobby Kennedy, equal to Brian Hooker. They're always on stage together. This is not a mistake, ladies and gentlemen. This is an admission. And 5 years in retrospect, this is much more than an admission. This is criminal evidence.
Published research, we know that there are genomic differences at the genome level and important parts of important proteins. There are large differences.
Now, the reason why this is criminal evidence, in my humble opinion, is because, again, the track record seems to belie obfuscation. It seems to suggest that they heard the right language and they just chose not to say it. They heard the right language from Brandy Vaughn. And that's why Brandy Vaughn is on stage with at least 4 people we now know are probably not good guys. It is remarkable to see Judy Mikovits and James Lyons Weiner there. It is remarkable to think that we are in 2025 and none of these people talk about Brandy. None of them have shown you that Brandy was on Dateline ABC in Australia. Now, what's interesting about this is that I want you to use your mind to realize how Australia and New Zealand were used against us during the pandemic and how we were used against them. During the pandemic in 2020, everybody agreed that something terrible was happening in America because we couldn't get our story straight. Some people wanted to lock down, other people didn't want to lock down. And so the virus was spreading like mad. But because New Zealand and Australia had such strict lockdowns, they didn't have the waves of death that we had, the waves of murder. And so both countries were portrayed as their respective example of what works or doesn't work during the pandemic. And it would have been very hard, if you weren't trying, to see how we were used as an example of a failing response and they were used as an example of a successful response. But that's how it happened. Murdering people in America was necessary in order to seed the pandemic around the world because there needed to be numbers. And before the pandemic, Brandy was used to demonstrate that anti-vax in America was causing a disaster, a measles disaster.
This is a public health crisis, and it is time to sound the alarm and take the appropriate action.
As the United States battles the worst measles outbreak in decades,
we're not vaccinating.
We're not endangering our children.
There's an information war on vaccination.
I get death threats. I get death wished upon my child.
There is a small group of people who are behind this incorrect science.
Why is one particular community getting the blame?
I came here today to show the world that the majority of Orthodox Jewish people in the United States do get vaccinated.
An hour outside New York City is a quiet suburban community at the epicenter of a severe measles outbreak.
Now, make no mistake about it, it's not by accident that we're now talking about measles again with Robert F. Kennedy in the spotlight about Samoa and all this other stuff, because this debate was set up. Part of the effectiveness of a limited spectrum of debate is that it's historically set up on a time horizon that you can't really see. So it feels real because Mary Holland and Paul Offit were opposing each other 10 years ago. So it makes sense that these are the same people that are fighting now.
Chil'ul Hashem is terrible.
Terrible.
So I
beyond terrible. I think that people have gotten so carried away that they're not even thinking rationally anymore.
One of the things that causes the angst, the anguish, the anger in our community among many people, such as myself, is that the world is getting a skewed picture of what Orthodox Jews believe. Because there are some nincompoops, unfortunately, that are uneducated and believe that shots are dangerous, or they're harmful, or they cause disease more than they cure, or they prevent diseases. There's an old expression that for every 2 Jews there are 3 opinions.
Martis is talking about the growing anti-vax movement within his community. Only 77% of children in Rockland County have had the measles vaccine, known as MMR. And in a desperate attempt to control the spread of the disease, around 6,000 unvaccinated kids were pulled out of school. Most of them are ultra-Orthodox Jews, a community rooted in traditional beliefs.
They're less connected to popular culture. That would be the best way of saying it. Preserving the old ways and staying as close to the Torah as possible. Now, Hasidim would never go to a movie theater, but they're never supposed to. Thanks for coming out.
A movie theater is where things
So
would
far
spread,
this year,
of course.
there have been over 1,100 reported cases across the US and 296 in Rockland County alone.
That's no deaths. I just hear cases.
Measles is an incredibly contagious disease.
Incredibly
People catch it
contagious.
through droplets in the air or by touching infected surfaces, where the virus can live for up to 2 hours. In extreme cases, the symptoms of fevers and red spots.
I mean, even using the word live for 2 hours is already mythology, right? That's how you hear it.
Spots can be followed by pneumonia and encephalitis, which can lead to death.
And pneumonia and encephalitis are both bacterial, so that's also weird. It's just weird.
But the real story of a vaccine is told in the fears and smiles of a little girl.
In the 1960s, a vaccine became
Listen to this
widely
music.
available, leading to a breakthrough in the year 2000.
CDC reports the measles practically wiped out tonight in the United States.
In just under 20 years, measles has made a comeback. In the US, over the last decade, the virus has spread amongst tight-knit communities where immunization rates are low. Like 383 cases in an Amish community in Ohio in 2014. Around 95% of the population needs to be vaccinated to stop the spread of measles. It's called herd immunity, and it protects those who can't be immunized, like newborn babies and cancer patients.
Newborn babies can't be vaccinated. Wow, that's weird. I thought that they could, at least to Hep B,
World Health Organization now lists vaccine hesitancy a top 10 threat to global health.
The World Health Organization's opinions matter.
Anti-vaccination movement is growing.
This anti-vax movement has proven to be very dangerous.
The anti-vaxxers are putting their kids' lives at risk.
There's an information war.
Don't forget, in December 19, Sam Harris will go on Brett Weinstein's podcast to say that when the next pandemic comes, we won't be able to tolerate this anti-vax shit anymore. This is all one timeline on one planet. Don't forget, one country, actually, America.
Or across the US as the...
If you want a big top tent for health freedom, you better leave the event right now, is how I would currently frame it. Because that's really what CHD drops the ball on since I've known them. They opt for the big top tent of health freedom and taking a stand on nothing. And having banners that they throw in the garbage after their conferences, so much so that I could take one home. And it says, rise and resist, people over profits, truth over lies, courage over fear, committed to nothing. And Brandy, if you want something sugar-coated, you better get out of here now. That's how I kind of feel too. If you want this story sugar-coated about who these people are and how malevolent they are, it's time to leave the stream right now because it's about to get really ugly. because actually, if we just do the timeline here, you know, the 24th of September was where she is featured on the news in America having billboards. And on the 19th of September, just a couple weeks after this Dateline Australia, you can hear her say it very clearly. Whoops. My bad. What happened there? I have to click on it. Cannot play media. Oh, then I have to escape and start again. Sometimes I just run out of room.
All at once.
Here it is.
And so now I'm going to turn the camera and I'm going to introduce you to a woman that I met. And I met her because she came up at the Q&A and she said, mentioned that her 11-year-old had started having seizures after just one shot. And before that, he was completely unvaccinated. And the reason I wanted to share her story is because so many times lately with the new law in California and all of this, I hear so many parents saying, well,
likes nonstop.
That's mine.
Yep.
Isn't he cute? Anyway, I hear parents.
Likes nonstop and also hearts nonstop, please.
He hasn't seen me much today, so he's sticking close by. Anyway, I hear a lot of parents say, well, my children only need one more shot, or what if we did a selective schedule or delayed? And people ask me about that all the time, and I tell them point blank that I could never suggest anything like that to anybody because I have too many friends and know too many parents who have lost their children after just one shot. And here, luckily, this parent didn't lose her child. He was 11 years old, but he had...
One of the people that CHD has done a book with recently, Mr. Paul Thomas, Dr. MD, is an advocate for a slightly altered schedule. There's a video of him at the beginning of 2016 saying that he's really excited about RFK being chosen as advisor for the new Trump president in 2017. It's remarkable what these people and how long they've been entangled in this little mess. Here she is stating it plainly that I could never recommend anybody to take any shot because I just wouldn't. I have too many examples of single events where they wish they could go back and not give them that shot.
Grand mal, massive seizures after just one shot of DTaP at 11, and he had no previous vaccine. So you really never know when that last shot or that one shot is going to have a serious effect on you or your children. And
the reason why is because intramuscular injection is, in fact, Russian roulette. Some of the reason it is Russian roulette is because of this mechanism that Marc Girardot was shouting from the rooftops in Panda and all over the place a couple years ago about how a bolus injection and how they talking about you have to retract the needle a little bit to aspirate it to see if you're in a blood vessel. Yeah, that could be an additional way the damage is done. But it really actually is an admission that there is a time frame that if you do intramuscular injection correctly, it will be a very slow release of this combination of toxins and biologics with untold numbers of consequences over an uncalculable time frame because we don't know how long it's there because you've already bypassed the normal means by which the body would protect itself from these things that include the toxic adjuvants that are in there as part of a medicine, a pharmaceutical that is injected as opposed to swallowed. And so I'm going to keep hammering, as other people I think will keep hammering on Brandy because Brandy really brings it home. Now, what if Polly Tommy also had a video before Brandy died where she said, basically, they were trying to get us to focus on the MMR or a component of the MMR or Andrew Wakefield instead of realizing that the truth is in the unvaccinated kids. Wouldn't that be weird if there was a video from 2019 where Polly said that?
Well, make no mistake that the other side, without a doubt, do not want the public, the people, the parents, to hear the stories of the unvaccinated. They want us to talk about MMR, autism, Andrew Wakefield. They want that to go down the same path every single time because they can attack us. But you cannot attack the generations and generations of the health of the unvaccinated. Vax2 doesn't even...
If you knew this truth and then you realized that they were going to roll out an intramuscular injection and try to coerce everyone on Earth into taking it, what would your message be? If you knew this truth from more than a decade of fighting, because this woman has been fighting for, and up to 2019, she's been fighting for almost 2 decades. She's had books, multiple movies, over 100 billboards. She's met the Prime Minister, all before this. Years and years and years and years before this. Her daughter was an autism advocate in the UK. So they've had a long time to get this message out. And so after all this time, in 2019, she is saying that they are just trying to make you about MMR and Andrew Wakefield and autism and not talk about the unvaccinated kids and their health and their exceptional. Interesting, isn't it? Because that's nowhere part of the newly formed CHD that was only formed about a year before this when the World Mercury Project changed its name.
Even begin to cover the health of the unvaccinated. We uncovered so much. We uncovered generations and generations standing there saying, we've never had any cancer in our family. We've never had rheumatoid arthritis in our family. We've never had diabetes. We've never had any of these things that you see that are just common elderly conditions. They don't have them in their families. And as we went deeper and deeper into the world of the unvaccinated, I could see, the team could see, this is why they don't do the vax-unvax study. This is why they're trying to censor us and stop.
If you knew this truth, and I do know it now, why is your message not the vaccine schedule in America is criminal? Why isn't your message that intramuscular injection is dumb? Why aren't we trying to score this touchdown and never vaccinate another kid again? It's hard to explain it any other way than she was co-opted. Somehow or another, after the death of Brandy Vaughn, this message disappears. Brandy's message disappears. The succinct, coherent, dead-on balls accurate messaging disappears, and we pivot to a big top tent for health freedom with Mary Holland and Polly Tommy doing podcasts for CHD. The same people that were in this photograph, James Lyons Weiler, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Judy Mikovits. Why is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in April 16th, 2020 doing this? What is happening in this video? Please tell me what's happening in this video. Please tell me what's happening in this video. How is it possible that on April 16th of 2020, we are going to sit down in the house of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and he is going to tell us her story? How in the nine hells is that possible?
Unprecedented onslaught against you. Multiple articles in the mainstream press, from the Washington Post to Forbes, have come out to attack you in the segment of the film Plandemic that you appeared in. I want to separate your story from the film itself, as the two have been conflated.
It's May. I got to change that.
I want to start just by asking Mr. Kennedy, you recently wrote the introduction to Judy's book, Plague of Corruption, And in that, you placed her in a long line of dissident scientists, from Rachel Carson, who discovered the dangers of DDT, to Alice Stewart, who found that X-rays during pregnancy led to carcinomas in children later on. Researchers who were at first scorned and later hailed as heroes. What makes Judy a dissident in this tradition? And what is the Semmelweis effect?
Well, the Semmelweis effect is that dynamic that you described, where predominant medical orthodoxies are safeguarded ideologically in kind of a knee-jerk reaction by the medical community, and particularly the doctors and the kind of the medical cartel and the medical community tend to go immediately into a defense posture to defend things like, X-raying pregnant women, even long after the establishment between that procedure and cancers in those children is well established. The same thing happened with thalidomide. The same thing happened with calomel, which was a mercury-based tooth powder that was used for 100 years and was finally terminated in the 1950s. That was causing these devastating illnesses in children. DDT was another thing that the American Medical Association, because it had recommended DDT for the suppression of malaria, it was the last group to be willing to back off and say, yeah, there's a problem here, even when the science was well established. Ignaz Semmelweis was a Hungarian doctor at a time when more than half of the women who went into hospitals were dying for childbirth, were dying of puerperal fever, which was also known as birthbed fever. And he had an idea. This was before Pasteur, before germ theory, before anybody knew about germs, but he had an idea from his own anecdotal observations that the scientists who were the doctors, who were the same doctors who were performing autopsies, that they were not cleaning their hands between the autopsies and delivering babies, and that they were bringing some kind of toxic particle into the birthing rooms. And he did an experiment where he got them to wash their hands, and he dropped birthbed fever from around 50% mortalities, from around 50% to around 2% of the women who came to the hospitals. When he published on that, at first he was applauded. But then suddenly he was derided, and ultimately he was tricked into going into a mental institution and apparently murdered. And the medical associations at that time went against him with a vengeance because it challenged their...
He is telling this story under the pretense that, very similar to this guy, Judy is a hero. This is something serious here. This is really something.
Their kind of deified position as physicians, saying something that you're doing instead of helping patients is actually hurting them. And that's part of the reason that we see this, this enormous reaction to any kind of criticism of vaccines. And of course, Judy's science was a devastating blow to them, because what Judy discovered, among many other things, what Judy discovered was that there was a virus that had been grown on mouse brain tissue. When you grow a vaccine, when you're making a vaccine, you grow them on animal tissues, on cocker spaniels,
on cocker spaniels,
on mice, on pangolins, on bats.
On pangolins? On bats? Are you kidding me? Did he just say that? While Judy Mikovits sits quietly at the table of his house? Holy shit! What? You gotta be kidding me.
On horses and on insects and on human deified position as physicians, saying something that you're doing instead of helping patients is actually hurting them. And that's part of the reason that we see this, this enormous reaction to any kind of criticism of vaccines. And of course, Judy's science was a devastating blow to them, because what Judy discovered, among many other things, what Judy discovered was that there was a virus that had been grown on mouse brain tissue. When you grow a vaccine,
when you listen to what he says right now, when you grow a vaccine, you grow it on, and he lists things that are involved in the pandemic, you can hear that the script is not done yet. The script was going to be, and I heard it very early in the pandemic, that it was a vaccine candidate. It was a self-replicating vaccine for HIV that got out of the lab, and it was an HIV vaccine that was based on coronavirus. And what is he doing right now? With Judy Mikovits at the table in 2020, he is seeding a narrative that he's been given about the idea that, well, when you make vaccines, you grow them in all kinds of stuff, like Cocker Spaniels and pangolins and bats. What I need you to see, ladies and gentlemen, is this book was teed up already in 2020. They already knew what they were going to do. They already knew what they were going to do. They already knew how they were going to do it. They were going to fool us into solving a mystery, and all of these anti-vax people were going to be part of it. Listen carefully, because there is no mistaking this. This is impossible. Why would he list all of these animals instead of saying fetal cell lines or saying Vero 6 cells? Why would he say these things? Ha 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 ha!
You're making a vaccine, you grow them on animal tissues, on Cocker Spaniels, on mice, on pangolins, on bats, on horses, and on insects, and on human lung tissue from aborted fetuses. And that's how vaccines are made, most vaccines, or many vaccines. And Judy discovered a virus which she was assigned to work for.
Keep in mind that she has not said a word yet. The son of Robert F. Kennedy, the guy whose Department of Justice presided over the creation of the FDA with Brett Weinstein's father, this guy is now explaining the history of Judy Mikovits. It's pretty awesome.
For the cause of chronic fatigue syndrome. Chronic fatigue syndrome was a devastating illness that appeared in an epidemic form in the 1980s, and it affected mainly women, and the medical community behaved reprehensibly. They dismissed the disease as a psychosomatic illness. It was at a time when women were first entering the job force at high positions in corporations. And they said this illness is because women are not biologically equipped to handle that kind of responsibility that was traditionally belonged to men, was a province of men, and that's why they're getting these psychosomatic breakdowns. And what Judy found when she actually started studying the disease for NIH was that the women who complained of chronic fatigue syndrome and had been diagnosed, 63% of them had a virus.
So this is basically stupid, complicated explanation for how intramuscular injection is generally dumb, especially if you're going to do all kinds of biologics and stuff. It's a stupid, complicated explanation that gets nobody out. It saves no one. And in 2020, a year after that photo was made, and about 5 months before Brandy's going to die.
That she was able to find and identify and isolate that was called the
And so
virus.
she isolated a virus that she also advocated to vaccinate against, so that would make the vaccine schedule safe. Her argument was that if we first vaccinated everybody against XMRV, then we could use the contaminated vaccines and it wouldn't matter because we'd already have immunity to XMRV. I shit you not. We watched that video on this show.
Trying to isolate.
That's where we are, ladies and gentlemen, right here. And how many of these heroes have mentioned Brandy? How many of these heroes have been able to say anything remotely as succinctly as pre-pandemic Polly or Brandy Vaughn? Apparently nobody can say it. But everyone has a timeline, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone has a timeline. I have a timeline. I met the Drastic people in February of 2020. I have a timeline where I started speaking out about transfection at a University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine faculty meeting. And in fact, the only person I know of who spoke out about transfection in 2020 at a U.S. medical school and was told not to come back. And about a month after that, I met this lady named Piper Stover who delayed my production of the review that said stop all transfection until May. And at that time, I was introduced to Brett Weinstein, Heather Hang, and Alexandros Marinos, and Chris Martinson, and Jumi Kim, and Matthew Crawford of Rounding the Earth, all who have ended up being more or less traitors. Meddlers who knew everything in this signal chat that I was telling them, including transfection is bad, that the PCR is on a hot background, so it's bullshit, and so the entire pandemic is a fraud, in order to get us to accept transfection as a successful vaccine. They knew that in 2021 because I told them. And I have the signal chat messages to prove it. I have all of the receipts. University of Pittsburgh has all the receipts. Drastic as a chat group has all the receipts. The splitting of Drastic into two groups happened because of me saying that we had to start talking about transfection and screw the origin of the virus. So then during December of 2021, Kevin McKernan was on my stream. And then about a week and a half later, Charles Rixey came to Pittsburgh to do a stream with me that a couple months later would be told to me by Ron Johnson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. the reason why they wanted to hire me. And then I worked for CHD for about a year and a half. And at the end of that, the book was released. And I spent about a year during the finalizing of the book trying to get people to realize that if you understand infectious clones, then you understand that RNA cannot pandemic. And we're kind of not writing the book right, but it didn't happen. I ended up getting fired. That's my story in a nutshell. And so what I'm suggesting to you is that a timeline for any of these people would reveal their malevolence. And in such a ridiculous list of happy little accidents that it would be almost vanishingly unlikely that it's due to just sheer incompetence. It almost has to be on purpose. But let's just go with the pretense from now on that all of these coincidences across these last 5 or these last 10 years are just happy little accidents. And those happy little accidents have resulted in an illusion where we've all engaged in trying to stop something that doesn't need to be stopped. And that these people engaged in a theater that made us believe that we were contributing to stopping the train, to helping it start again. This is the best way to think about Robert Malone and Meryl Nass and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Judy Mikovits and James Lyons Weiler relative to what they did with Brandy. Because Brandy walked into this subway station and saw Judy Mikovits and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and James Lyons Weiler and all of these people pretending to fight against the vaccine schedule, to try and slow it down, to give people choice, to give people free, to give people informed consent. And then they said, Brandy, come help us. We got this movie we're making. It's vaxxed. Come help us. And she started stopping the train with him and pushing to start again. And for a while, she felt like she was participating. But then she started to say, hey, guys, I mean, we're kind of wasting our time here. Maybe we should just tell people not to get on the train at all. And that's when those people started ignoring her. and kept going. Well, we've got to stop this train or it won't stop. No, I don't think you need to. I don't think we just need to tell people not to get on the train. No, they kept doing it. For years, they kept stopping this train even after Brandy said, no, we could just tell people not to get on the train and then we wouldn't need to do this anymore. Do you see? Because the same thing was done to me several times over the course of the pandemic, where I was given another set of these people that I should try to convince them of what I thought. Maybe if I just convince Brett Weinstein and his Signal chat, then everything will be okay and we'll finally make some progress. Oh no, maybe if I convince the writing crew of the Wuhan cover-up, then maybe we'll be okay. Oh no, maybe if I'm a staff scientist at CHD and I convince the internal staff of CHD, then maybe we'll finally make progress. Oh no. That's not how it works. It's just a bunch of happy little accidents that happen where no progress is actually made. And that's what you see with Brett Weinstein. It's a happy little accident in 2017 where he just sues a college for $2 million and gets $500,000. It's just a happy coincidence that he's on Rogan saying all of these things that are exactly what the narrative needs. It's just a happy coincidence that after over 5 years of following me, 3 times admitting on his own program that he listens to me and that learned biology from me, although I think I thought of this myself as well, on my own, while he's promoted people like Asim Malhotra, while he's been in front of the Senate and also in Romania with none other than Steve Hatfill on stage.
Another thing that's ominous is any discussion of mRNA being used.
There is no way to explain the language that they are using in this current video, given the fact that what I just told you, that in 2021 he was in a Signal chat with me and he knew everything. Because I could say everything about the PCR, everything about virology, and everything about the transfection and how it was we were being misled about it. All of it. All of it. And now listen to what him and his wife said a couple days ago.
Used for things like cancer or bird flu, within either the, American body politic or more globally.
Yes, and actually, since you mention it, this is a great place to remind people of what you and I, the hard-won insight that we have over this is that a lot of ink has been spilled over the spike protein. And the spike protein is a problem in and of itself, to be sure. But
the spike protein is a problem in and of itself, and it is not, but it is, as I've told you for 5 years, the illusion. They want you to believe that it's a toxic protein so that you don't blame transfection as a generally bad idea for healthy people. And now what Brett is going to do is to try and dilute and titrate that idea to the point of uselessness. Listen carefully.
The lion's share of the harm that seems to come from the mRNA shots is the platform itself, not the payload. Mm-hmm. And because of that, this should be dead on arrival. When we are told
this should be dead on arrival is something that Brett could have said before any college kid took the shot, but he did not. I know he could have said it because I was trying to get him to say it. Because I was saying it at a U.S. medical school before I ever met him. And I, in fact, lost my job. A 20-year career that you can find on PubMed ended because I insisted that people at a medical school ought to be calling it a transfection, not an investigational vaccine. And they asked me not to come in anymore and to turn in my badge and keys and paid my contract out for another 10 months without a word. I think because I was being used by the national security state to set me up to be a lab leak whistleblower of some kind. It's possible. It sure feels a lot more likely now that I realize when Piper Stover came into my life, when and who brought Brett Weinstein into my life, how long this clock has been running, and how long I've had it right and then been confused and then been right again and then confused and then come right back to right again, while all of these people have been running around in circles driving motorcycles in a metal sphere.
Bird flu might be addressed with mRNA. The answer is, well, how the hell are you going to do that without causing myocarditis and a bunch of other pathologies that are the result of the immune system attacking your own tissues? You still don't have an answer to that question, because we know what an answer would look like. It would look like basically an addressing system that sent the mRNA to specific tissues that...
So he's still talking about ways to fix the methodology. If we had an addressing system that could send it to tissues that are okay to destroy, is the biggest bullshit nonsense statement he's ever made in the history of the pandemic. And he is exactly revealing that he's doing nothing but following a script. If he actually could understand these ideas, he would know how ridiculous what he's saying is, and how incongruent it is with the foundational conclusion that you can't express foreign proteins using transfection in a healthy mammal and expect the immune system to just go on and not have catastrophic consequences.
Were effectively okay to be destroyed, but it has to be an addressing system that's good enough to prevent it from getting into your heart, or the whole thing is, the idea is DOA.
So as long as it doesn't go to your heart, it's okay. Do you see? Listen to the language.
And we A, don't have an addressing system at all, and B, once one begins to be developed, there will be, of course, questions about its efficacy and safety.
100%, and you would need honest-to-goodness testing, and we have a system that isn't even capable of honest-to-goodness testing. One final thing, as long as we're here, people should be paying attention to the following thing. When you propose an mRNA platform shot to address a contagious pathogen, you're not going to escape the problem that's being described. There is no known mechanism to address these things, and so you should simply say no to any proposal. And anytime you hear it discussed, the answer is, well, have you solved that basic problem? Because until you have, this is a non-starter.
And so in 2025, it is absolutely inexcusable for them to only be here. It is absolutely inexcusable. In fact, it is just a happy little accident that they're here, despite having had my ear and my tutelage for almost a year, available to them on a daily basis, answering questions, repeating things, explaining it in another way. These people are just plain old charlatans. They're just plain old traitors. And they're probably members of the SAG union because they're just on social media lying as part of their job. That's how they grift. That's how they take money. That's how they get sponsors. That's how they get, the support that they get. And it's probably a network of people connected to Brett's dad. The dad that worked with Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s dad during the development of the FDA. And so these happy little accidents continue to happen. One of the greatest ones that I find really funny is that you go to Tess Lawry's, LinkedIn page, and she says that she's the director of the evidence-based medicine consultancy in Bath, the UK, and mentions nothing about the World Council for Health. That's weird. I guess the evidence-based medicine consultancy is where she gets her money from or something like that. Oh yeah, sorry. There's also coincidences about who she publishes papers about, detoxing the spike protein with Jessica Rose and Paul Merrick. It's all just one big network, ladies and gentlemen. The latest sort of shenanigans in my timeline involved these three, and Professor Martin Neal, who I never really talked to, just had a couple messages from. Nick Hudson and Jonathan Engler are actually members of PANDA, and I've known them for a while because I presented 3 times to PANDA. Jonathan Engler is kind of a guy who is like Brett. He likes to think that every idea is his own, and he never will give any credit to anybody he hears anything from. He'll just adjust the words a little bit and say that he's known it. He's a guy who worked in pharma for a long time until he retired and then became a lawyer. So I'm sure he's a really good guy. And Nick Hudson is a guy who lives on top of a mountain in a fantastic house, I guess semi-retired in South Africa, in the jungle. And he's an actuary, so he knows all about population pyramids and the expected, anticipated rise in all-cause mortality that was used to create the illusion of the pandemic, and has never mentioned it. And so this guy and this guy together at Panda, this is also a Heart co-founder with Claire Craig. These two guys lost all of those presentations. They're not on their Rumble channel. So what's interesting is that Jessica Hockett contacted me as somebody who had more recently joined Panda and heard of me through the people in Panda, Nick and Jonathan. Now, what's curious about this is that the second or third time I presented to Panda, Panda added to their Slack group and to their group in general, because that's what Panda was, a Slack group where people had discussions, and of course they could mine the information and other people could read what we were thinking. They brought in two virologists, one virologist named Mary and one virologist named Jennifer. Mary, the virologist, was actually hilarious because she was so naive to this scam that she was being brought into that she actually did a live stream with Kevin McCairn in Japan around this same time, which is a dead on balls accurate admission that it's just one network. So these two ladies were brought into Panda to kind of, be my opposition to virology and to tell us that virology is real. And one of them worked on flu in Hawaii. That's Jennifer, the virologist, and Mary did some other stuff. Anyway, the point is that I left Panda after those two joined, and after that Slack group kind of just started to become so dumb with, those two virologists basically saying Jay doesn't know what he's talking about, and most of the people in the chat, I guess, thinking that's true. I just left Panda. I didn't trust them anymore. And then here comes Jessica saying stuff about New York City, and when I contacted her, she said these two guys are the guys I trust the most. We should work with them. So I want to explain what happened with Jessica Hockett. Jessica Hockett is not on X anymore. I think she quit because she realized that her private messages or direct messages to me are incriminating. Unfortunately, she's not aware of that I've been copying all of those for years already. So even though she left Twitter, we still have all the receipts. Anyway, the point would be, these little accidents happen. Nick Hudson and Jonathan Engler losing my presentations on Rumble. You can just search for Panda, and maybe you can't see that now. You can search for Panda, and you can search for my name, and you can find me. But if you search for me in Panda, or you search for me in the Vaccine Safety Research Council, you're not going to find me. But if you do JJCouey, you can find me on Rumble. And if you look for Couey and Pan data, you're not going to find me, but there are 3 presentations that I did that are in my archive. But if you look for Rose and Panda about the second to the way down, you're going to find both of Jessica Rose's presentation to Panda. So it's not like the search engine doesn't work. It's just that those were just, happy little accidents that those 3 presentations that I did for Panda in 2022 were lost. That's too bad. So Jessica Hockett is, according to her own description on Substack, is actually an independent researcher focused on COVID events in early 2020 with an emphasis on the New York City death spike. And she's writing from a wood house, and that's her handle, Woodhouse76 or something like that. So interestingly, I would characterize her as an American traitor. I would characterize her as a collaborator of Panda, which is also a sabotaged organization, an international organization used to kind of split the resistance up and to undermine America as a culture. That's why they're especially active as a group on X, for example. Jessica Hockett left X last year, though. She's blocked me everywhere, including on Substack, which is really cute because, of course, you can still read things that people send you. And so other people have sent me her recent work. But I think it's really important to put into context why I would strongly advise you to put these three people into the bucket of international traitors that are working to extend and maximize the chaos created by the pandemic and its effect on the American culture in a negative way. The reason why I would say that is because these people have been involved with me for at least a year and a half. They've known who I am. They've been watching my shows, and they've been direct messaging me since about August 2023. And so it's very important to understand that Jessica Hockett says fraud, not murder. And she never mentioned supplementary oxygen ever since we came to that conclusion with the help of her. Mark and I stumbled upon supplementary oxygen because of her, more or less, and questioning the protocols in New York led us back to Kyle Seidel saying that they're running out of oxygen because they're using it at 60 liters a minute, which was very similar to Leslie Batt's husband's death sort of protocol list. And so Nick Hudson never says murder, and Jonathan Engler never says murder either. So the idea that a murder in America was used to create the illusion of the pandemic is something that none of these people will say. I will explain that again and say it succinctly. The idea that murder in America was used to create the illusion of the pandemic around the world will never be mentioned by these people, even if we give them the numbers, even if Denny Rancourt shows them the numbers, even if we give them mechanisms, they will never say it. And that makes them guilty. Now, in the same way that I can show you that I contacted James Lyons Weiler in February 22nd, 2020 to show him my JC on a Bike coronavirus ride and asked him for an interview, I can also show you when these people contacted me first on X. And that should be pretty definitive evidence of when these people started communicating with me, because that's where this is done. That's where this whole show is done. So I will remind you again of when I came up with transfection as being a bad idea, when I finally figured out infectious clones, and I show you here that Jessica Hockett, Nick Hudson, and Jonathan Engler and Martin Neal got in contact with me in the middle of 2023 when I was still employed by CHD, but the book had not come out yet. And so Nick Hudson contacted me first after 3 presentations for his group Panda. He had not contacted me yet, except for in the Panda Slack. And he contacted me on July 8th, 2023 in Twitter. And about a week later, I sent a message to Jessica Hockett because she was brought to my attention by Nick, if I remember correctly, but it maybe be somebody else showed me her work, and I contacted her, and she said, sure, I'd be honored to be on your show. That was July 19th, 2023. And August 13th, Jonathan Engler joins me. Why? Because Jessica said I should trust him. He's a good guy. Let's make a little group. Why don't you follow him on X so that he can DM you? And then on the 31st of August, Professor Martin Neal also joined me. Great to meet you. This is my Substack. Here's one article of mine. I'm looking forward to working together. There it is. We're going to write a virology review. This is August 30th, 2023. We're going to write a virology review about clones. And so I started making that Substack. And I've shown it to you, where I was telling them how virology is done in cell culture using transfection, etc., etc., etc. And they ignored it. Ignored it for a long time. Actually, the book came out, and then they ignored it for another 5 months before finally on May 30th, Jonathan Engler sends me this article that they wrote that Jessica Hockett said I should have written with them. I could have written with them, but you didn't want to work with them. It's unfortunate. And I was like, what are you talking about? I've been putting together the Substack article with notes. You guys are ignoring it. You wrote this. And that was a year later. A year of talking on DMs, of having Signal chats, of getting little cute voicemails from Jessica. And it culminated in May of 2024 with me and Jessica and her friend Hugh Gaston presenting to Senator Ron Johnson's staff members. And then Jessica basically broke off contact with me. And so let's put this in perspective again now. I met Drastic in 2020 in February. Then I lost my job for saying transfection in around August. Then around, I guess, September, Piper Stover gets in contact with me and delays the publishing of my review that says stop transfection in humans until May. And then I get in contact with Brett Weinstein through Piper. Then Kevin McKernan comes on my stream. Then Charles Rixey comes to my house. Then Senator Ron Johnson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. call me on the same day to tell me that Robert Malone sat them down and made me watch my stream. Then CHD hires me for a year and a half. Then I figure out clones because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. asked me to teach it to him. Then Kevin McCarran came to Pittsburgh, which is so strange still. And not till August 2023 do these 4 people get in touch with me. And then a year later, a full 6 months after the book comes out, they release this Virus Origins claim of function. Not gain of function is a mythology like I've been saying for 2 years, but claim of function. It's our idea. It's our idea. After Jessica trying to get me to write something with them for like 7 months and me telling them they're ignoring what I want to write. They're not listening to me. They're writing a virology review. This is stupid. And so that came out May 30th, 2024. And that thorough review of the available evidence suggests that the emergence of a novel engineered virus is the least likely explanation for the event known as COVID pandemic. The discovery of novel viruses is a function of how we determine to find them. This looks like, and if you read it for yourself, you have to go behind a paywall now, of course. If you read it for yourself, this is not a simple explanation for a lie based on a hot background of a PCR test. This is a stupid, complicated explanation that never commits to anything. Doesn't explain anything and makes it wishy-washy and bullshitty. And it's like 20 pages long. And on the 13th page, supposedly they cited me. Jessica says they cited your work. They're really great guys. And how did they cite my work? With 2 giant paragraphs where they just say down on the bottom here, Jonathan Couey, dead link, and James Giordano. And here in the first paragraph, they seem to be explaining something that they say is their own idea, but it's not. It's also just a stupid, complicated misrepresentation of mine. And this is also a stupid complication of a very simple idea. And this they did in May of 2024, ladies and gentlemen. That's like 7 months ago. Now, the reason why this is important is because right after this happened, I begged Jessica Hockett to see that this is not a genuine review. This is not a genuine citation. If they wanted to help me, there would be a link here to Gigaohm Biological, not a link to James Giordano. They would have linked to me all the way up at the top of the article, not in page 13 in the 16th citation. After a year of courting my ideas, of asking questions in direct messages, this is the thanks I got. And so I was mad. I was very, very mad at these 2 guys because I thought all this talk, all this explanation, all these things I've shown you, and then this is what you get, that there is a real virus. It doesn't matter. And what does that mean? It doesn't matter. Well, I have the direct messages right here to Jonathan Engler, where in this message I say, this is what I sent to Martin. I sent a message to Martin saying, this is the stupidest review. Welcome to 2020. This review I did on a bike in 2020, dude. Why are you writing this review now after a year of talking to me? This is bullshit. And in fact, in the subsequent message to Jonathan Engler, I say, I'm starting to doubt simply because we don't seem to make progress. Just you and Nick and Hart seem to make progress and get noticed. Maybe it's just an illusion, but I pay pretty close attention to the patterns are pretty stark. I've tagged all of you hundreds of times over the years, and you all have mentioned my work a couple times and can't even get to the point to another biologist explain it better than me. It's extraordinary. I said it. And these messages are real. These messages are recorded. These messages are going in my book because these people ignore it. And that's why I got mad, because look at the date of this tweet. This is June 8th, 2024. It's about a week after their big claim of function Substack that you should have written with us, but you didn't. And now you're missing out on all the accolades. And this Claire Craig person tweets, you can believe there was a virus. You can believe that virus killed people. You can believe gain of function played a role, and none of that would contradict what Alan says here. In fact, it's easier when there's a virus spreading too. Claire Craig is co-chair of HART. Claire Craig was an author on the paper with Kevin McKernan about the Corman-Jorston report. She has over 200,000 followers, and these people promote her and would not correct her about this. In fact, this is after their virology review. They could have corrected her by citing their virology review, but they did not. They admonished me for saying it. I said on Twitter, hey dudes, since you're so good at saying there's no pandemic, why don't you correct this nutcase? And they admonished me offline that Claire Craig's a good guy. You can't, she's a great person. She means well. You're misunderstanding that. No, I'm not. I've been trying to tell them for a year that there is no gain of function virus that can go around the world. That's a mythology, and RNA can't do it either. The whole thing's a mythology. And so we've got to get people like Claire Craig to believe that. But did they do that? No. No. Instead, they blocked me. Now, I pleaded with Jessica Hockett on this date. I pleaded with her to see that this was a disaster, that these people had to be lying because that virology review is shit. And now they won't check Dr. Claire Craig, who they, of course, chair the HART group with. And he is co-chair of PANDA. So it's very strange that Nick and this guy agree that we shouldn't touch her, even though she has never questioned the PCR test. Never questioned it, ladies and gentlemen. Never questioned it. In fact, Claire Craig is a genome collector from before the pandemic. Since 2016, she was the day-to-day lead for the pathology and clinical data in the cancer arm of the 100,000 Genomes Project. She also worked in AI cancer diagnostics. So a former retired pharma exec turned lawyer and a 100,000 Genomes Project doctor founded HART, and we're supposed to believe they're good guys. And an actuary who never talks about population pyramids founded PANDA with that same retired pharma guy turned lawyer. And we're supposed to believe PANDA's a good organization too. So this woman who says that you can believe in a virus, you can believe virus killed people, you can believe gain of function played a role, and you can believe that a virus is spreading too. It's actually easier if you do. This is what she said about the PCR test in 2021.
Now, testing itself can fail. Every test involves a compromise. You have to choose, do I want to find every possible case, or do I only want to find the definite cases? And at the beginning of an epidemic, when cases are growing, overdiagnosing a few people is acceptable. But at peak deaths, you have to change strategy. You change strategy instead of focusing on the individual.
So at peak deaths, you have to change strategy. So nothing about this talk will tell you that PCR is bad, and in fact, it's going to compare it to restaurant food in about 2 seconds.
You look at the population. Instead of trying to diagnose every possible case, you want to find the definite cases, and you have to change your laboratory strategy. So you may have heard people talk about restaurants and say that there are 3 things restaurants can do, but they can only do 2 of them well. You can have fast food, cheap food, or high quality food. Well, it's the same with laboratories, but the 3 things are high volume of tests, high speed of tests, or quality test results. And you choose 2. We chose volume and speed. And actually, those are good ones to...
This is malevolence at its finest. She is not usefully questioning the foundational myths of the pandemic that are very, very, very much surrounding the tests. This is absolute malevolence, and her coordinated actions with Kevin McKernan make it obvious. Her coordinated actions and protection on social media by these other actors makes it obvious, and their ignoring of my ability to more succinctly summarize these ideas than they themselves can is further evidence of their collaboration with this malevolence. Now, without wanting to beat too much of a dead horse here, I think it's very important to understand where this occurred and at what time it occurred, because, again,
for what it's worth, I mean,
the voicemail that I played at the beginning of the show is a voicemail that comes right after I beg Jessica to understand that this virology review and their inability, they're ignoring Claire Craig as wrong, as perpetuating a lot of these myths when she could have spoken out, ignoring her connections to Kevin McKernan. It means that they're bad guys. And I pleaded with her as an American to understand that these guys are foreigners and they would happily work against us if they're not working for America. If they're part of this controlled demolition of America, you need to be scared of them, Jessica. And this is the voicemail she sent to me one day before she blocked me. And this is the voicemail she sent me really one day after she released a video of our presentation to Senator Ron Johnson. I had no idea that she would block me. I had no idea why she blocked me, because this is the last communication I had with her. And it was very specifically about me pleading with her to understand that Nick Hudson had been on a boat with these people off the coast of Turkey, and that Jonathan Engler had been ignoring me for too long. I've had too much conversation with these people. They're not interested in moving the ball, and that this Substack was evidence for it. This is her voicemail response to that.
It's such a chaotic scene right now. It seems like, intentionally, obviously it's only going to get worse with the election coming up. I still, I don't follow very many people anymore. I just follow like 22. If I follow somebody, I trust them, as far as I know, as much as it depends on my knowledge and sense of things, that it's not that I agree with everything that person says necessarily, but that person they are who they say they are. They are authentic. If, I admit that I'm biased because I know that, especially Jonathan Engler, I know him well. So, and have, for a year plus.
A year plus, and this is June 2024, so she's known him for at least a year, almost as long as she's known me.
So, if Jonathan Engler turns out to be, something that he's not, or some kind of manipulator, I mean, I would be devastated. I would be absolutely devastated, and probably, quit this whole thing and be like, okay, then I don't know anybody. Then I can't tell anything. So that doesn't mean that you have to see it the same way. Martin same, like as far as I know, Martin and Norman Fenton are putting, they put their Substacks over the past.
Listen, they always try to tempt you. Oh, you're going to get published. They're going to publish. They're going to cite you, and that's going to make you feel better. Listen.
4 years into a book. I've read I skimmed the book, and the chapter, or excuse me, that paper that they, that Jonathan and Martin just wrote, where they included your work, it's going into that book. And content that I wrote with them is going into that book. Martin's in the academic world. He was finishing marking up papers this week.
He's in the academic world. What is that supposed to mean? I was in the academic world for 20 years. What does that even mean? It sounds like she's just naive.
So, and he does play things a little closer to the best, right? That is the way he is on social media. But my experiences with him have been very good. So yeah, if those guys are like playing me or using me, or who knows, right? Again, I don't know what to say.
Who knows? Who knows, right? It's just for all the marbles. It's just for all the marbles. Who knows, right? I can't tell.
But I would continue, if I were, I can't tell you what to do, but I would continue to give them, I recommend giving them the benefit of the doubt until there's really, really good reason not to.
Now, if she'd have stopped right there, it would be fine, right? Then it just seems like, Jay, it seems like you're right. Maybe she was, just one, maybe it was that Panda and maybe Jonathan Engler and Nick Hudson have fooled her, and that she really does think they're good. But she doesn't stop there. The amateur hour continues because they really think I have the hook deep in my throat. She doesn't stop. She keeps going. And what she says on June 6th, 2024, at the end of the last voicemail that I got from her is such an admission, it's kind of comical.
Catherine Watt's an interesting one for me. I mean, I replied to her on Sage Hannah's Substack. I actually blocked Sage Hannah, but because he, told me he didn't care if I got shot in the head or.
Okay, so that you gotta break that down, right? Because out of nowhere she brings up Catherine Watt, which I don't think I ever said anything about Catherine Watt. I don't know I can't understand why that came up. But then she says Sage Hannah, and then she says she blocked him because he said, but then she's going to say that she doesn't know who writes that Substack.
Some kind of crazy nonsense. I have no idea who runs that Substack. I think Catherine's legitimate. I don't understand the role of Sasha Latipova 100%, but I've been honest about that with people about what I think is going on there. Again, head down. I'm really trying to focus on what I'm doing and what I do well as much as possible, because I believe that will bring the best result. And you've been really formative, for me, and I think a lot of other people, and you've taken the hits, not just with the clone stuff or the possibilities of, building a biological bridge there with the clone, but you've been helpful in helping people see who some of these players really are. I think that in some ways is probably your best, biggest contribution. And I've tried to honor that and cite you where and when I can. So, I only know who I am, and I'm legit.
I'm legit.
Have a good day.
Have a good day. I'm legit. Have a good day. I'm legit. Have a good day. Now that's May and June of 2024. And if that would have stopped there, it would be fine. But guess what? Last Friday, they kept going. That's the sad part. Last Friday, they kept going. Now remember, this has been my message for quite some time, certainly as long as Jessica's been my friend, which is like a year or so. And certainly it was my message when I presented to Senator Ron Johnson. It was certainly my message when I presented for a very long time now, for a couple years now. And so all of these people who claim to know me or cite me but don't cite me are admitting that they are part of this, because as Brandy did and as Polly did before the pandemic, if you're not saying it right during the pandemic, it's an admission. Especially if you were saying it right before the pandemic like Polly was. So anyway, we are here right now. This is the February 2025 Jessica Hockett, Nick Hudson, Jonathan Engler, Martin Neal. Remember, this is the timeline. Where are we in February 2025? We're right here, where Jessica Hockett writes a Jonathan Engler article called "The False Binaries That Limit the Spectrum of Acceptable Opinion in the COVID-19 Debate and Perpetuate Lies Told by the Powers That Be," Part 1. Now, why is this funny? Remember, they met me in August of 2023. They were watching my streams before that because Jessica said it would be an honor to be on your show. I had already presented 3 times to Panda before Jessica was ever in the audience of Panda. And all 3 of those presentations were seen by Nick and by Jonathan. So it's strange, right, that in 2025, that's where these 2 are. Promoting an anonymous account? Interesting. And Vinay Prasad? Interesting. Let's look further into this very, very insightful February Substack article by Jonathan and Jessica. Oh, so it's a limited spectrum of opinion according to Noam Chomsky. Interesting that they use Noam Chomsky's work here. Of course, they just found that by themselves. It wouldn't be that I've been using that slide for like 3 years that brought it to their attention. They're just using Noam Chomsky, which is fine. It's a happy little accident, right? As we go through this, you will find an enormously stupid, complicated version of the central false binary, blah, 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 the gap between the pro-narrative permitted dissent views, blah, 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 blah. It's much, much better to explain it this way to young people than to say that they tricked you into solving a mystery and that made you accept their monsters. No, let's write a Substack where we make it really, really complicated. And then in that Substack, let's have all kinds of bullshit and all kinds of active links, like an active link for Vinay Prasad on X, like active links for democide or for fraud, but not murder. But then when we cite Jonathan Couey in a Substack, there's just this happy little accident that occurs. When we cite him in the links, we don't know how to put a link for Jonathan Couey on Jonathan Couey's name. That's pretty hard to do. So instead, we're going to give you a link to Michael Senger's Substack with all dead links to Jay's work. And then I'm going to give you a link to my own work. And I'm going to give you a link to the virology review that also kind of cites Jay's work on the 13th page, but not really. That's Jessica Hockett, my friend, who was SMSing me for almost a year, sending me pictures of her niece. That's how she's helping my family right now, by writing a Substack that makes my ideas stupid complicated while giving me credit, but not really giving me credit. And giving me credit for what? For the false binary idea? Either or fallacies, she calls it, with another link, not to me. The real sad part about this, ladies and gentlemen, is it gets much darker because in the comments, or the link that she gives, right, is to this virology review, which is now behind a paywall. And that virology review was written in May of 2024, and it is bullshit. And in fact, we had a falling out because it was bullshit, and she would not accept that these people were not helping me. And she goes on to say all the things that I'm saying in her own Substack that she also links, not to me, but to her own Substack, where she says, again, in a very stupid, complicated way, that this is what I think right now. For what it's worth, this is my current view. And this is basically just a stupid, complicated, here's infectious clone right there with no citation. This is the worst kind of malevolent traitor right here, this person right here. Jessica Hockett is one of the worst traitors there can be, because from the very beginning when she contacted me, she was fake. The happiness was fake, the friendship was fake, the giggling was fake, all of it was fake. She did it to Mark too, in coordination with these people in Panda, to write these articles over the course of a year and a half that dilute and obfuscate the simple truths that I can put on a single slide and have been able to since the duration of our acquaintance. These happy little accidents have been happening to me for 5 years. Another happy little accident that happens in that same Substack of Jonathan Engler and Jessica Hockett is that Mike Eden comes in and says, "Thank you both for a fine piece and for making the results of your evaluations clear. Very much appreciated." And she gets to talk back, oh yeah, very much, there's a lot of room for this stuff, you know. It's been very hard for me. Proverbs, blah, 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 Proverbs. Oh, wonderful phrase, the phrase false binaries. Mike Eden and his collaboration with Sasha Latipova and often promoting Sasha Latipova, and now this performance right here. I'm sorry, folks. Mike Eden's been on my stream and has heard me talk and knows damn well that I got it right. Mike Eden is a liar and a traitor to our children. It's really unfortunate, but this that happened last week can only be seen as malevolence. He is actively coordinating with them the titration of us over the finish line. He may be just working with the people that want to control, demolish America. But that's what's happening, and you can, if you want to, see it for exactly what it is. Because Mike Eden's timeline reveals it. Mike Eden's interaction with me reveals it. They've all known for too long not to say it. Mike Eden is a guy who knows exactly how biologics are made and has never told you the truth like I have. Jonathan Engler is a guy who worked in pharmaceuticals and probably knows how biological is made and never told you like I have. And Jessica Hockett is just somebody they recruited and used because she's willing to lie for pay. It's really sad where we are right now, where really if you want to accept the last 10 years of history, you have to accept an inordinate amount of happy accidents where people just find themselves in the right place at the right time with the wrong language. Find themselves in the right Zoom meeting.
Strong words from Vice President Biden, who heads the White House Task Force on Guns.
You think that this is
I'm off the rails on guns in America. Ben Shapiro is editor at large.
You think this is by accident? That little boy is on with this English guy in 2013, or do you think that we are being set up?
Honestly, Pierce, you've kind of been a bully on this issue because what you do, and I've seen it repeatedly on your show. I watch your show.
Just like this was a setup, ladies and gentlemen. At the start of the pandemic and before, they have been setting up all of these people to play a role in our governance because they saw it coming. They saw the internet for what it was, an opportunity to create a noosphere, an illusion of global communication, an illusion of global awareness. And so with that algorithmic military tool, they can make it seem like this guy spontaneously rises. They can make it seem like there's some spontaneous illusion of consensus about how smart he is. Just like they've made an illusion of consensus about this guy being some kind of whistleblower, when in reality he is absolutely part of the narrative. He is a malevolent player. He is one of the earliest actors and probably one of the guys that's coordinating the script. That's the reason why he was in position from the very beginning. Think about this very carefully, ladies and gentlemen, and work backwards. Get rid of 2025. Forget about the fact that he went on Danny Jones and lied about Charles Rixey. Forget about the fact that he went on the Brett Weinstein podcast. Forget about the fact that we were on a stream together with Bodwin and Senef and Rose, where I told him all of this shit and then he ignored it for a year. Forget about the fact that he was in front of the Senate. Forget about the fact that Kevin McCarran came to my house or Rixey came to my house or that he was on my stream in December of 2021. Forget about the fact that he was on that girl's podcast and just think about the 3 times in 2020 that he was on the Vance Crowe podcast. Vance Crowe being a former World Bank employee who decided to go into podcasting at the start of the pandemic. And he went on, this is also before the Corman Johnston review. He was out there in April of 2020, the same month that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was regaling everyone with the amazing history of Judy Mikovits. This guy is on a podcast with a former World Bank employee telling us all about how PCR can be used and how he uses it and how pot genomes can be sequenced and stuff. And then, because he didn't get it quite right or he's still rehearsing, he went on the stream again a month later and said the same thing, except now he was more sure that the FDA was in the way and causing the pandemic, because if they just get out of the way, we'd already have all this stuff done, testing and repurposed drugs and stuff. And then to make sure that this took, he also had to go again on the 30th of December 2020 on the same guy's podcast to say the same shit again. There is a virus. It is spreading. But maybe it was here in October of 2019. Who knows? And so then he goes on this other lady's podcast. This lady also has Meryl Nass on in the same year. So, you know, it's obvious, right? Once you start to see that we're in 2025 and all these other things have happened. If all of these other things have happened in the context of what started in 2020, there's no way to explain this as random. There's no way to explain the Corman Jorston review in November of 2020, written with Claire Craig of Heart, as being accidental, written with Mike Yeadon. There's no way to explain it, ladies and gentlemen, other than malevolence. These people are in on it. And that's why after he spoke in front of the Senate, Mary Holland of CHD interviewed him about what he said. It's all one big show where these people have used acolytes on social media to hijack any meaningful anti-vax movement and turn it into a bullshit health freedom tent, a populist movement that could be used to move voters around, just like Polly did in the UK a decade ago. They discovered that the anti-vax movement could be a useful political movement, and they hijacked it. That I think that Mark Kulak is probably right, that Bannon helped them hijack it, that Elon helped them hijack it, that Peter Thiel helped them hijack it, that Kevin McKernan helped them hijack it. The vaccine schedule in America is criminal, and you can learn that by comparing it to any other vaccine schedule in the Western nations. Any of them. Just do it. I have a viewer right now who says she's making a Excel file to do that very thing. And once she has it done, I'm going to put it on my website, because it's really important to understand that like an eclipse could be used to fool Indians into believing that you can communicate with God, a incoming anticipated rise in all-cause mortality due to the large family size after World War II has been known for 20 years, and they have been positioning people, positioning programs, positioning legislation, and positioning influencers into position to take advantage of that biological phenomenon and turn it into something that could be a myth that could govern humans for generations to come. Do you understand what I'm saying? They took a phenomenon that they knew was coming. The pandemic took the population pyramid and an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality and turned it into a mythology about how RNA can pandemic. And they did it using people on social media, something that was not available in previous exercises like the swine flu of 2009. They did it using all of this social media that we have acquiesced to, that we all skillfully use as a way to get to the truth. The thing that should wake everybody up on our side is to realize that if you think that you are following the right people when you are following Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you are following Alex Jones and Glenn Beck and Brett Weinstein and Eric Weinstein and Sam Harris and all of these other shitheads. You're not following anybody smart or anybody insightful or anybody with an unblemished track record of integrity. You're following compromised people. People like Mary Holland, who have not managed to accomplish anything in the 10 plus years that they've been a public figure. You're following people who are leading you into the same trap that Tony Fauci and Peter Daszak are leading other people into. The same trap that The View is leading other people into, because you are being manipulated by these people who are engaged in a very lively debate within a very limited spectrum. And within that spectrum, you and your children and your grandchildren will be enslaved. That's why there's no epidemiological evidence of spread and why the murder stops and starts in 2 years. Why there was no useful questioning of this for those 2 years. because it was not a pandemic, it was murder. And it was murder that was on the background of an anticipated rise in expected deaths. So a lot of these people were going to die, but they had to sweep them together with murder in order to create these sharp peaks. Otherwise, these sharp peaks wouldn't be there. This would just slowly rise in a slope like this. It would rise like that. But instead, they had to create these sharp peaks with murder because that's what they pointed to in 2020. Look at the curve here. If we extrapolate from this using even conservative models, it looks like 1 billion people are going to die.
Stop lying!
And so that's how this happened. An anticipated rise in expected deaths was sculpted using murder and sophisticated liars to create the myth of an RNA pandemic. And people like Tony Fauci knew it. Rick Bright knew it. They all knew it. Kadlik knew it. They all know it. And I would argue that also Robert Malone knows it. Kevin McCairn knows it. Charles Rixey knows it. And if they don't, then they're just ignorant. They're just bamboozled, or they're just taking a paycheck, because there is no way there is a novel virus going around the world in light of this list of ways that people were murdered in 2020. There's no way to explain away all of these. The math is there's nothing left for anything to be killed by a virus when this was going on in 2020. And that's why it was so important for these people to be present, so that we would solve the mystery of the novel virus. These people enacted the dinner theater that's still going on now. In Steve Kirsch's steering committee, and in signal chats about Bitcoin, and in private Zoom meetings, and in steering committees, and in writing committees, and in chapters of books. It's all the same shit. That's why all of these organizations that have formed in the last 5 years have never stumbled upon Brandy's message like I have. Intramuscular injection is dumb. And after I gave it to them, they have ignored it. The same way they ignored Brandy when she was saying it, they ignore me. Because that's their job. That's the system. That's the trap we're in. And no matter how succinctly I say it, they're going to ignore it the same way they ignored Brandy, and the same way they ignored Polly before the pandemic. The same reason why Polly's not saying it like she said it before Brandy died. Because it is real. There is no safe vaccine. The intramuscular injection of medicine is a lie. Brandy said it before me. Polly kind of understood it, I think, because Brandy told her and explained it to her. And the rest of these people are just liars and traitors. James Lyons Weiler, Judy Mikovits, Robert Malone. These are the worst kind of Americans because they are participating in the enslavement, not of us. We're just being fooled. They are helping to enslave our grandchildren. And so you want to know how to figure it out? You got to make a calendar of your favorite heroes, and then you will see it. Make a list of what they were saying and how they said it, and realize that a lot of them knew who Brandy was and have never told you. Realize that Americans' grandchildren deserve the truth. They deserve to know what these people did and how they did it. And there is an easy way to explain it, and it's not those Substacks about some false dichotomy or some shit like that. They fooled us into solving a mystery. And by solving that mystery, we accepted the monsters. Ladies and gentlemen, this is for all the marbles. You want to tell your kids the truth? Tell them that there's a huge difference between ingesting a pharmaceutical and injecting it. And for some reason, the injected pharmaceuticals are completely void of liability if they're called vaccines. Explain that to your kid, and explain that as why these people exist in the first place, is to make sure that this truth never gets out. Ladies and gentlemen, you can also explain to your kid that PCR as a diagnostic is a fraud. You can explain to your kids that the only thing that these pharmaceutical companies have ever had is synthetic recombinant genetics, using DNA in cell cultures to make a lot of DNA, and from there they can make protein biologics. They could also make RNA, but it can't be made pure, it can't be made well, can just be made in quantity, and that quantity can be detected by PCR, so they can make it and they can put it places. And that means that they could have told their agent in Wuhan to claim that she found a sequence that they wanted her to find, and that would give them an excuse to transfect everybody to that sequence. It's that simple. And Robert Malone knows it, and Mike Callahan knows it, and Sina Bavari knows it, and David Hone knows it. Rick Bright knows it. Peter Daszak knows it. Charles Rixey knows it. Robert Malone knows. They all know it. They all know that transfection was always a crime from the very beginning. And a lot of these people know that I've been saying that since 2020. A lot of these people know that's why I lost my job at the University of Pittsburgh. And a lot of people know that the easiest way to pull this off would have been to roll out placebo. In fact, placebo may be a way that the current vaccine schedule is also protected. By rolling out a significant number of placebos, you don't have to worry as much about a signal. And since they don't work anyway, what's there to lose? I think this is probably one of the biggest lies that was ever told and is still being told today. Another big lie is the idea of endemicity. This is the concept that if you put a RNA in a mud puddle, that if it's the right RNA, that it could go from there to being in the background forever. Like coronaviruses are in the background forever. And this idea, this biological principle, is a foundational myth of virology that needs to be broken. Just like the idea that PCR is a real high fidelity measurement and not just a noise measurement. RNA cannot pandemic, ladies and gentlemen. The way they did it was placebo and non-specific PCR tests. Intramuscular injection is dumb, just like Brandy said it was. There is no easy way to say this, guys. We are in big trouble because we have been led to believe something that we probably should not believe. And it's because there was a biological phenomenon called the population pyramid that they could bamboozle us with, and a bunch of coordinated liars on the internet. It's not a fun message, but it's a hopeful one, because I just see all these little happy accidents, really very impressive. But if we don't realize that they're not just little happy accidents, the past will fade into mist, and that past will be erased. The erasure will be forgotten by our kids, and this lie will become the truth. We can't let that happen. Please don't let that happen, ladies and gentlemen. I love you very much. Thank you for being here. I'll see you again, maybe not tomorrow, but Thursday for sure. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I will see you again soon. JC on the Hardwood has not stopped. It's just that I'm getting myself in better shape because I'm not going to make a fool of myself when I do it for real. So give me a couple more weeks on that, and then that's also going to start. Thank you very much for being here. I'll see you again soon.